Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
So now this movie that we're talking about today is Breathless from 1960. It's Jean-Luc Godard's first feature-length film. And he had an interesting way of getting to the point of making this film because he started as a critic and he got to this point just like his friend and co-writer Francois Truffaut. And they kind of started working right around the same time. But it seems like from all the research I've done since I've seen this movie that there wasn't a lot of preparation for the actors for this movie because it was kind of like writing lines while, not necessarily while they were going on, but writing lines like the day before or the night before.
I heard the morning of sometimes.
And that's rough. That's rough. I'm sure. Now, luckily, the two actors were the two main actors, Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg are professionals, so they were able to handle it. But that had to be nerve-wracking for them. But the movie itself for me was very energetic, even though it has like a 20-minute scene in the bedroom of them talking, and so I was surprised by that. I knew about the jump cuts and all that stuff, which we'll get into later, but that part for me was interesting that it kept my attention. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. I've heard about this movie so much. I've seen other Jean-Luc Godard films. I watched Alphaville, which is a crazy sci-fi movie that doesn't have any special effects or anything. It's just like in the future, but there's a lot of weird societal things going on in that movie. So I've kind of dipped my toe into Jean-Luc Godard films, but have never Contempt. I saw that, but I have never seen this movie, which is probably his most famous movie. So, What about you? What's your Godard pathway?
Nothing. To this film, you suggesting or we suggesting that we should do something we haven't seen, and we usually do something you haven't seen that I have seen, and something I haven't seen that you have seen. But for whatever reason, we did it like this. I think you said Breathless, and I was like, oh, I've never seen it. So. I've heard 1,000 things about it. I know about the jump cuts. I know about the use of the Paris streets where they just filmed, and you can tell. It's a tad bit distracting, but I'm wondering how much I could tell if I didn't know that. I might have figured it out very quickly. So no, I don't know much other than the reputation of the film and how it's influenced a lot of people and how people talk about it being an influential film. So I didn't really know anything about it. And side note, when you were saying that thing about writing the day before, the day of, or whenever they were writing, it must have been nerve-wracking. Olivia Colman said something very interesting about that. She said, I would rather rehearse a play for 88 weeks and do it once and never rehearse for a film, but do it as many times as you need me to do it. So she doesn't like to rehearse, sometimes blocking and stuff like that. You have to rehearse, depending on cameras and stuff like that. But like, I really know, right? I just talk like all the filming I've done. But that's what she said. So in a way, the spontaneity and the dialogue's not heavy. It's not, pages and pages of dialogue. There's a point, here's the point, get around the point by saying this, this, and this. And some directors have done that. I think Richard Linklater has done that, where he said, okay, here's the goal. You need to get here. How you get there is whatever. And so they just film it until they get it. And, and then there's other people like Quentin Tarantino, who's like Shakespeare, who's like dot, mammoth, comma, dot, so...
Well, and Linklater's one good example, and then also Curb Your Enthusiasm, that show, the Larry David show, that's how they shoot too. They're like, okay, we know we start here and we know we end there, but we don't have a script. So let's just do it and we'll figure out the funny beats in between. And I'm sure they do it a bunch. But it's interesting you said Richard Linklater because he just directed a movie. I just saw the trailer recently called Nouvelle Vague, which means new wave, and it's about the making of this movie.
No, really?
It's a recreation of the making of this movie. Yeah, they've got Zoe Deutsch playing Gene Seberg, and they've got some other French actors who I have not heard of. I'm sure they're great, but But it looks interesting. And I rewatched the trailer because I watched it a while ago, but I rewatched the trailer today, and you can see all the things you like, all the little kind of in jokes that they're recreating, obviously with her like wearing the New York Herald Tribune like sweatshirt thing, and just the kind of iconic parts they're recreating, but then also like the behind the scenes stuff they're recreating as well, like what the camera cart looked like when they're walking down the street, and it's kind of all like covered up.
Now to me that's interesting. If they did a remake of it, that's not as interesting. And we were talking about that there is a remake, a Richard Gere remake, and I don't really.
But it's a current day at the time remake, right? It's a 1980s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I think so. I don't really remember much about it.
It was an 83 movie.
My mind with his movies back then are blurry because there were some controversial ones that I had to stay away from. Diane Keaton's Looking for Mr. Goodbar I was too young for stuff like that. The American Gigolo, I was too young for that. So I must have been mature-wise not adjusted enough to understand it. So I can't say I have seen the Richard Gere version. I know of it, and I've seen some of it, but somewhere, but I don't know anything about it. So anyway, that remaking something like that is perplexing to me. It's like remaking Psycho shot for shot. Gus Van Sant. All of those people involved.
I'm sure it was a good exercise, but it's like it was mainly. Maybe it was mainly for him and for them. As opposed to, like, what if we recreated what Hitchcock went through when he made Psycho, and then we've kind of like, gone through that process, and now we can take that and take what we've learned and move forward and make something else.
Or how the scenes in real life influence the scenes in the movie, or vice versa. And the thing about that remake or reimagine, whatever you want to call it, and Vince Vaughn's not bad in it, and Anne Heche is not bad in it. It's not bad, but it is literally a shot-by-shot remake. But then he interjects certain things here and there, very Gus Van Sant style interjections, just here and there, one or two, and you're like, yeah.
You're like, I'm not a fan. So.
Well, it's not that I'm not a fan. I just don't. The idea is perplexing to me, so I can't get over that to understand what they were going for, because I've seen the original so many times, and I have a reverence for that film, and I have a reverence for Hitchcock. So I guess reverence is not the exact word, but I like those movies and I like his style. So I know that movie quite well. So when I was watching it, I was like,
I've got Rear Window right behind me here because it's another blonde actress in a movie, in and around that time, like a little bit later. But I was interested in this movie because I knew about the French New Wave, and then I guess obviously with this Nouvelle Vague movie coming out, I thought it would be interesting. I really did want to see it before this Linklater movie came out, and I think he's got like another movie coming out this year too.
He does that.
He'll like stock them up and then just be like, okay, here you go, here's all of them. But I think that their dynamic, the Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg's dynamic is interesting. It's intriguing, and they say a lot of things that are very like, I don't smoke pot, but I could imagine people like saying, it's just very spacey and very kind of I don't know why I can't know what to think, or I mean, like there's just these like. What? I don't even know what she's talking about.
So wait, so you think that smoking a pot is like that, or that's what you're like when you're smoking pot?
I know. I'm thinking that like from what I've heard from other people, where it's like, it's the classic, like you look at your hands and you're like, whoa, oh my God, I can't believe I have hands, It's like that kind of a thing. And I'm just like, they're not necessarily getting there, but they're getting close.
Oh, they're close.
Especially in that bedroom scene.
Which I think is the best thing in the movie. Yeah.
It is.
When she's in front of the poster, that's there. When he's in front of the poster and the camera comes down, that's exactly what you're talking about. I was going to make a funny joke about you smoking pot, but I'll stop.
Well, North Carolina, it's definitely not legal.
Would you eat it?
Not. What's crazy isn't, and Steph just got back from Missouri, and it's like it's legal in Missouri, which I would never have thought that it would have been legal in Missouri.
It's silly. If it's legal in Washington, D.C., it should be legal everywhere. That's just silliness. That's just absolute silliness. And the actual money that's made by that industry, it's, it's fine. And it also is medically good for some people. Anyway, next subject. It's legal here.
Yeah, so, there you go.
Medical marijuana card.
There you go. Either way, I think that so that is a great scene, and the just reading about how they had to shoot that scene out, there's not a lot of room in that space, in that physical space. So it was basically just the cinematographer, who I wrote his name down because he's done a lot of films that mainly new wave films early on, especially because he started right around the time that Truffaut and Godard started. Raoul Coutard, and he did Shoot the Piano Player, Jules and Jim, Contempt, Band of Outsiders, Vive sa vie, and so he's done a lot of the Truffaut and Godard movies, and then kind of went on. He directed a few of his own movies, but so it was him and Godard in the space with the two main characters, and that was it. They had no lighting setups in there, which also allowed them to be a lot quicker. They could move the camera around, whether it's handheld, or they could place the camera and then get a close up, and then move the camera again and get a different close up. I mean, they're able to move quickly because they didn't have to adjust the lighting setups. So that allowed them to be it allowed them to probably mess around a lot with the dialogue and then say, well, why don't you say this? Or why don't you say that? And so I think that it probably gave them a little bit more freedom, which is kind of the opposite of a lot of the movies that a lot of the filmmakers that I like, a lot of the auteurs that I like, where they're very measured and they're very prepared and they have a goal and they want to get towards the end of that goal. But I think that it was probably one of those, things, the electricity associated with the making of this movie. Everybody was hitting on all cylinders at exactly the right time, and they were able to get something out that was new and different. And due to constraints, they took those constraints as challenges, and it benefited the output, which I thought was kind of cool. Whereas other times there's a bunch of other movies out there that production problems or limitations cause the movie to not be so great.
A lot of times, though, art being influenced by a lot of money and a lot of yes, and instead of no, don't do that. There's a lot of examples. I don't want to diss on anybody, but a lot of times when you don't have the money and you have to find a way, it's your way of finding whatever you're finding is way more interesting than what you would have come up if you could have put down the cash and said, okay, we want this, this, and this. Okay, we're going to do this in a studio, and this wall's going to move, and the bed's going to move, and all this is going to move for this lighting and that lighting. And it probably would have, she probably wouldn't have had to cross over that bed the way that she does. They probably wouldn't have had to flick the cigarettes out the window like they did. I don't know if they would have or not, but and man, does he smoke the whole time? Is that the reason why the movie's called Breathless? Gosh, why is the movie called Breathless?
He's French.
But I
did look that up. I mean, because it's actually it's Breathless was what it's translated to, but it's a bout de souffle, which directly translates to out of breath. So you could probably
I wonder why.
You could probably translate that to a couple different things.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie's 60 years old, and is by the end, there's a character that's literally out of breath, is not around anymore. So you could translate it to that maybe, but I think that that was the other thing that was interesting. They didn't have any credits at all. I think it said it's said in French, or a bout de souffle at the beginning, and that was
fin
it.
At the end.
Yeah, at the end, yeah, like fin, yeah, like we're done. But which I've always I knew about that from when I was a kid, because the Animaniacs would finish a black and white scene, a cartoon scene, and then it would say fin at the end, Yeah, but so I think that the other thing about their limitations that helped the movie is, and especially with the jump cuts, is that they the way that Godard uses the jump cuts in this movie specifically is not the same way that we're used to, like John Wick or Michael Bay or, these types of like jump cuts. Cause, I grew up on jump cuts. I grew up watching MTV. I grew up watching music videos, and that is where the jump cuts that I'm used to are. And a lot of those jump cuts are reframing the action. It's like, we're going to show you this angle. Now we're going to show you this angle. Now we're going to show you that angle. And we're not even going to give you enough time to process what's going on, because we're going to, inundate you with more and more information. Whereas with this movie, the jump cuts were really just jumping in time and keeping the camera in the same position, but then jumping in time, like eliminating the space between a conversation. They may have been having a conversation about hot dogs, and then they have a conversation about bumper cars, but the space in between, how did they get from hot dogs to bumper cars? We don't know. It got compressed into a cut, and that was new to me. That I didn't seen that before, and it allows you to lean in to a conversation or to a scene, and it also propels that scene forward, I think. And it could have been done for multiple reasons. I read that the movie came in, it was too long, and
20 minutes
they wouldn't
too long.
release it. Yeah, they wouldn't release it.
And so instead of cutting action things,
or instead of cutting a whole scene,
yeah,
which is what they would do. That's what a normal director would do.
Yeah, he cut in the scenes.
Yeah, so he's like, oh no, I'm not gonna get rid. Or like he would have these huge long takes where they're walking through a pathway to go from one road to another, and they're going in a covered walkway, and we see them walk the whole way, and they don't even necessarily talk to each other very much, but we're following that action. Or they start on one side of a counter and go all the way to the other side of a counter, and nothing really happens between there. You could cut from that. You could cut from a single shot on each of the characters, and then you could cut over to another part of the counter or a different room where the same characters are talking to a different person in the hotel or whatever they're.
That sort of happens when she's trying to escape that guy in the movie theater.
Yeah.
The way it cuts from her getting up, then she's in the bathroom, then she's in the stall, and then he's there, and then he's in the bathroom, and then she's out the window. That all kind of cuts that way.
That made more sense to me, as far as the quick cutting there. But it's the driving scenes where we're just like boom, boom, boom. It's like you're in the city, now you're in the country, you're in the, whatever it is.
But it's in the middle of those scenes that he does a lot of those jump cuts when there's even dialogue, or maybe not dialogue. Like there's a scene of her side profile, and then all of a sudden it's clip outside, clip inside. And it cuts in the actual scene. And that I found interesting. That I found, and my understanding is that was not used as much back then, and that's why people were taken by it, that they were kind of blown away by that technique, because it wasn't used as, I'm sure it's been used, but
even nowadays, the way that you cut around something, let's say the beginning of a line of dialogue is good, but the end is bad, you can cut to the other character. If it's a dialogue scene, you can cut to the other character while that person is saying the dialogue. And then that way you don't, if a fly, lands on her head when she's finishing up a line of dialogue, you could just cut away before the fly lands on her head and point it at the other guy. But if that's not shot, if they didn't shoot a reaction, or if they don't have any of that footage, if they were only on her for those scenes. Now, that all being said, this movie was overdubbed. The whole thing was overdubbed. And it actually did not bother me. I'm really sensitive to that. I don't know if you remember when we talked about the David Bowie movie, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Like, it seriously bothered me. And because there were certain scenes, maybe it bothered me because there were certain scenes that were, on set sound, captured sound, and there were other scenes that were overdubbed, and it didn't line up to me.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that when we talked about it.
Yeah, in this movie, everything is overdubbed for a couple of different reasons, but everything is overdubbed, and it's done really well. The mixture of the score, which is, jazz music, and it's really like one piece of jazz music, kind of like reconfigured in different scenarios, and that works great for me. And it's that's a bridge, whether they're like driving and whatever stolen car they're in or whatever it is, or whether there's a transition between, or whether she's looking at herself in the mirror in a storefront or whatever it is, there's some sort of bridge. And the background noise, whether it's the street noise or her walking, in heels or whatever it is, like it all is done really well. Now, I don't know if I was watching it on Criterion Channel, so maybe it got like I think there's a 4K transfer version, like a redone version of it, so it's probably fairly recently been redone, and they may have cleaned up the audio or something, but it's really tight, and I have no complaints about the audio of this movie, even though it was overdubbed, because it seemed like it was a whole, it was part of a whole, and things didn't stick out like they did for me in and actually Don't Look Now too. I mean, both of those, that's same director. So Nicholas Roeg, the Don't Look Now and Man Who Fell to Earth, like they just
okay. So break this down for me. You're talking about they film a scene in the bedroom, then they go into the studio and loop it, so it's overdubbed. Right?
Correct.
Because usually looping is saved for like you're doing an outside scene or you're running or something and there's dialogue or there's sound and there's no way to boom mic that.
The plane goes by.
So they go into the studio and they have the projection, which is horrifying to me to think about, of your 30-foot head speaking lines. And not only do you get to see yourself as the character, but you get to analyze what you did. And so if they don't pick up everything in the dialogue, you go in and you overdub it, you loop it in, right?
Yep.
So that's what you're talking about. And you're saying that every single thing in this movie, even the bedroom scene, even the whatever, so because there was only a cinematographer and the director, there was not a boom mic operator.
Well, so here's why. The whole reason why is because the film that they shot on is 35 millimeter film, but it was still photography film. They needed that because that was the only way they could get the particular amount of exposure on this film. And it was less expensive, number one, and number two, that was the way they could do this without having to do big lighting setups. So because of that limitation, they decided to go out and find film that could handle that. Well, the only film that can handle that would be still photography film that you would put in a still camera. So they had shorter rolls of that. It was, I don't know what they said, like 19 meters or something like that. And so they had to splice together like these multiple rolls of still film camera and put it on a big roll, and then attach that to this particular type of film camera that was a film camera, but that film camera, the way that it grabbed onto the film, it caused the film to, like, the whole mechanical process was very loud. So kind of like IMAX, right now when people shoot in IMAX, like Jordan Peele did it for Nope. I think they shot on IMAX for Sinners. And there's obviously Christopher Nolan has shot the last
Dead Reckoning.
Dead Reckoning. And those were shot with IMAX film cameras. And so that's a very loud camera. It's just mechanically loud. And so because of that, it's hard to do on-set sound with microphones and all that stuff. So with Breathless, all of the scenes that they did the camera was too loud for them to get on-set sound. So that from the very beginning, they said, nope, we're just going to overdub it all. We're going to loop it all. So
that's crazy, because that's just nuts, because think about it. So here's your scene for the day. We're shooting 2 hours. Okay. And you're going to be smoking and half naked the whole entire time. And it's going to be this intimate dialogue about life, liberty, and the pursuit of love, whatever you want to call those scenes, because they were complexly simple scenes. They said a lot without saying a lot in those scenes.
I mean, there were lines like burglars are going to burgle, lovers are going to love, It's just like, okay, all right.
But also she says, he says, what are you doing? Or what are you thinking about? And she said, I'm trying to figure out if I'm if I love you or not. Is that what she says?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I'm in love. I'm trying to figure out if I'm in love with you or not, which says a lot about her character and says a lot about their relationship, and also explains later on how she kind of makes a switch. Although you don't really have a read on her in the beginning of the film that she is either going to condemn him or not. You just naturally think that that's what she's going to do when she finds out who he really is. Unlike Bonnie and Clyde, when you know immediately when you see Bonnie that she's on his level.
She's
you
all
just
about
know
it.
Yeah, she's Lady Macbeth, and they're toe to toe the whole entire film and in Macbeth. But
she also wants to get out of Dodge, though.
Absolutely. But she's still, it's a manipulative move that she makes, and that window scene she has, that Faye Dunaway has that scene in Bonnie and Clyde. Anyway, so on top of all of that stuff that you're requiring the actors to do, so you're going to act a scene that it was just written a couple of days ago or a day ago or the morning of, and then you now have to remember where you were at emotionally to go into the studio to loop it, because you're going to overdub everything. So did the actors know that when they were filming? Obviously they knew that, right?
I think it was pretty loud, and I don't know if they must have captured audio. I don't know. You know what? I don't really know.
There had to have been.
They had to have captured some kind of audio.
They
as
had
a
to,
reference.
because what if they couldn't hear what they were saying and they wanted to use the scene? They couldn't just dub something. Well, I guess they could dub something in. Well, that's amazing to me, because she does an incredible job of speaking French in an American accent. Yeah. And then because
there's some words that kind of poke out. But
there are a lot of words that poke out, but when she's first speaking, there's something instinctually that you go, what's that sound? And then, because I don't speak French, but then all of a sudden she starts speaking. Well, when she says Tribune, she
says New York Herald Tribune,
right?
That's
when she
in
says
English.
that, absolutely, it's very clear without a French accent. So I didn't realize when I first was introduced to the character that she was an American living in Paris, speaking French, but actually speaking an Americanized version of French, not an Americanized version, but speaking French with an American accent, and she does that flawlessly, because when she speaks in English, the same tone and inflection is there as she speaks in French. The words are just different. So that was amazing to me. So, okay, so on top of everything that they had to do, she had to go into the studio and remember exactly what she was saying and how she was saying it in that moment, or they both did. I think he had it a little bit easier, because he's
native French speaking,
and he has the cigarette in his mouth the whole entire time, and so he can muffle and mumble anything he wants, and he probably would have gotten away with it. So that's amazing to me that all of that was done. See, that's way more interesting to me than the jump cut stuff or the on the street stuff or whatever made this film infamous, because it is infamous and it is critically still acclaimed. And 1,000 people, like I said before, have made reference to this movie. So that's amazing to me that they had to do all of that.
What did you think about the plot of the movie? Do you feel like that the plot of the movie was integral to the film? To me, the plot just seems like kind of a placeholder.
It's like we've seen it a million times.
Together.
Yeah, we've seen it a million times, and we've seen it since a million times too.
I mean, is it like, Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story? Is it like that kind of a guy?
Yeah, which they mention in the movie. They mention Romeo and Juliet, which she goes from speaking French to saying Romeo and Juliet. And it's very interesting when you hear an English word while she's speaking French. It sounds very English. It sounds very Americanized. No, I think the plot, we've seen this plot. It's Macbeth. We've seen it a million times. We can go back to the Greeks, I'm sure, and find a reference to what's Majiggy? Terrence Malick's first film. What's that called?
Oh, Badlands.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if that's the same time frame or around the same time frame or before.
It's in the 70s.
Yeah, so it's after, so it's been influenced. So maybe this was one of the first of its kind. And I'm sure we'll find references, and I'll look up references later on that. So the plot, I don't think the narrative, the line of the plot is as important as the nuances of what happens in those scenes. And like the scene when she goes and talks to, I guess he's like a poet or a writer or whoever he is.
Yeah, he's got connections to get her into that press conference. Yeah,
Right.
Is that the guy you're talking
No,
about?
okay, but the guy in the press conference, the guy that they're interviewing in the press conference, and she asks him a question and he totally ignores her.
Yeah.
And then she asks it again in sort of I think another character kind of asks something similar. So I wasn't sure why that scene was there, but I found that fascinating because it says a lot about the character, that she was willing and determined to rise above her station in life of just selling newspapers to actually.
Well, she had ambition, and she was going to go to the Sorbonne too.
Yeah,
so like she was going to, to school, supposed to go to school, but this is her passion to do. And then so now she's got to figure out. I mean, her character is pretty complex. She's pregnant. She's got to figure out what's going to go on there. It's been a month, I guess. So, but
she says she doesn't know for sure. She's going back to the doctor on whatever day.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But either way, there's that. And then there's also her getting her first big break in journalism.
Right.
And then there's this guy comes back into her life after a month away, and he's doing that whole, like, I'm mysterious, you want me type thing.
Well, he's doing that because he needs a place to stay. He needs a grounded place to stay because he's killed a cop
and he's trying to hide out, and he's trying to get his money, and he's trying to get to Italy.
Yeah. So because she even says because he takes her key, she's like, "What are you doing here?" So forth and so on. So the plot per se didn't bother me. It's not anything we haven't seen a gazillion million times and probably won't. It's an excuse to get two people together, and I'm okay with that. And it's more about how they react to each other and the situations that was interesting to me versus the situations they were in. It said a lot about her, it said a lot about him, even though he's sort of like a one-note character on some level. He's this guy who's too cool for school, but he's also a kid. He's very young, and I think he's playing a gangster, and I think he's playing a mature guy, and I think because that opening shot of him with the fedora and the big cigarette, it almost looks like he's playing dress up, that he's like playing his dad, and his dad,
like a little kid in his dad's,
and the cigarette is
suit.
really thick, and if you were to pan down, the suit would be too long, and he had a friend underneath him that he's on his shoulders to make him look that tall. He looks like that. So as for the plot, it does. So, it's not that interesting, but
so the end to me is where it kind of starts. Like, I'm okay with it, and then we get closer to the end, and then she obviously, like you said, kind of makes a switch. She's not Sissy Spacek in Badlands.
Well, she reveals herself. She doesn't make a switch. We find out who she really is. We think she makes a switch because we're assuming things about her.
That's true, and we think that she's gonna ride or die with him, but and then she's kind of like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then the end was a little weird with him. Yeah, I mean, spoilers for Breathless, but the end was a little weird with him getting shot in the way that he got shot, and then his slow death.
I knew you were going to say something. I knew you were going to have a laughing fit about that as soon as I saw it. It's not.
He's like, I'm not dead. I'm not dead yet.
Well, it's like the ultimate death scene. It's like, and then you come back up, and you're like,
is it the Willem Dafoe?
I love
Platoon.
That. I love that scene, and I love that movie. So I'm not going to make fun of Platoon.
I just feel bad for him that his squibs didn't go off. He's having to act like he's getting shot when he's not. The squibs just didn't go off.
They didn't?
No.
But you get the point, so.
You get the point. I mean, you can think that maybe he's getting shot from behind.
Is that a commonly known thing in Hollywood?
I think it's a little trivia thing where it's kind of it's fine.
You two getting stuck in the lemon. Anybody who knows that reference knows what I'm talking about. But so no. First of all, him falling down in his last breath is a cigarette-filled smoke breath, which was funny because he's still smoking the whole entire time.
Yeah, he's not going to let go of that cigarette.
It just gave me so many different emotions. I felt like, okay, this is what should be happening to this guy. I mean, I'm not glad anybody got shot, and I'm not glad anybody's going to die. I'm not saying that, but this is the logical conclusion. And the fact that he got shot in the back, and then you see the blood slowly as he's walking. And of course, he has to go all the way down the street because the movie is filled with long passages through stuff, even though you say a lot of that stuff was cut or could have been cut. There are long passages. They're in that car going around that plaza when all the lights come on. He's standing there in that one shot when all the lights comes on. I like
they
that
recreate
shot.
that in the Richard Linklater shot. They were sitting there waiting for that, but it's such a good shot.
It's a great shot. Because it's a great thing when that happens in real life. Like when you were a little kid, even though that meant you had to come into the house when the street lights came on, but when they came on, and then they would come on slowly. And get brighter. Vapor, and I would watch the light come across the yard, and I was like, as soon as it hits me, I'll go in. But it's not technically hitting me, so I'm not going in. But the last shot is, side note, going back to what we were just talking about real quick, I think her character, the choice to call the cops, is the most perplexing choice that she makes in the whole movie. Because it counteracts everything she's done up to that point. You don't know who she is, really. You kind of find some stuff out, but you just think she's going along with this guy, doesn't really know anything about him. When she finds out what he's done, she's reading that paper. He's married. That was a long time ago. That's all he says. He doesn't
She even says like, "Hey, can we steal a Cadillac?"
Yeah.
Like a Cadillac?
Yeah.
It's like, so she knows that she's hanging out with the...
But she knows at that point. But she also knows when he goes, "Let me go get my car," and he steals that car from that guy that he follows up into the elevator.
Yeah.
When he drives up, she's like, "Wait, that doesn't look like the car I've known you to have." What? And she never questions it. So obviously she is more Bonnie than not at this point. But I find her calling the cops the most interesting choice that she makes in the film. Because why at that time does she call? Because she's with him that whole night before. She wakes up with him. She goes out. She even asks for a shot of scotch or whatever. Or, do you have any scotch or whatever at the bar? And he's like, no. And she's like, okay, whatever. And then leaves. So she has contemplated all of this stuff all night long. Did she wake up? She doesn't wake up with any urgency. She doesn't wake up with like, we've got to get out of here, or I've got to tell on you. She doesn't do any of that. But yet there's an instinct as an audience member when she goes down to that bar or the corner 5 and dime that she's going to call the cops. But to what avail? For what purpose? She's an accomplice at this point. She knows he's a murderer. She knows he's a car thief. She knows all of the stuff that he's done. He's stolen from her. He steals from the other first woman that he comes in contact with.
But
which is odd.
It makes me think that like she has determined that she doesn't love him, and that she's not willing to, I don't know how she makes that determination, but that's the only thing I could come up with. I don't think that she wanted him to get killed, and the way that he gets killed is a little like somebody like throws a gun and it's next to him, and then the cops shoot him because he's next to a gun. He picks it. I don't know why he picks it up either, but it's just it seems very, I don't know. It's very haphazard. Like the end to me is very haphazard, but I don't. And then the last line. The last few lines where I think he says, you make me sick.
Oh yeah. You make me puke.
You make me want to puke.
Yeah. And then she says, what?
She says, what did he say? And then the cop says, you make me want to puke. He said, you want to make me want to puke. And then she's like, what does puke mean?
Yeah.
Like
and
maybe she doesn't get the
thing.
Translation.
Yeah.
She does the lip thing.
Yeah. That he does throughout the whole entire film.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is what exactly? Why is he doing that?
I think it's so that she can do it at the end. She also looks into the I'm serious. She also looks into the camera.
Yeah, that I like.
And she does that earlier in the movie too. It's where was it? She looks into the camera.
She does?
I clocked it. And then I think they fade out. She looks into the camera and I think they fade out. It might be her in the bed. No, I don't know. There's another spot when she looks into the camera, and I can't remember exactly.
I'm
where it
really
is,
keyed in on stuff like that. I'm gonna have to watch it again just for that purpose. And side
Yeah.
note, I keep saying side note. I this is a film that I'm intrigued by. I'm not exactly sure why I'm intrigued by it. Maybe the history, maybe everything I've heard about it. But I do feel like I need to see it again. I feel like I'm gonna pick up stuff that I didn't understand. The jump cuts, the jarring of the scenes, the cop being shot and then flying into the woods. It's all jarring. And so it was making me question what I was watching, not absorbing what I was watching. But obviously I was absorbed enough to be able to have a conversation about it. But it is going to be intriguing to watch it again. I'd like to have somebody release it on the big screen. I mean, if we're in LA or New York, they probably do that once a year.
I'm sure there's repertory screenings of it. Yeah. And I haven't seen, I don't remember seeing any French films in like French New Wave films at like Alamo, or I mean that's really the only repertory theater around
that would
here.
Be the place.
Rialto's downtown.
You should make a request for that.
Yeah, they'll probably do it with Nouvelle Vague. I mean, it's begging for it, a double feature or something like that, where it's like, oh, watch Breathless, then watch the making of Breathless in Nouvelle Vague.
So, real quick, I don't know if you can do it real quick, but what is this the first film in ushering in French New Wave? Because I don't know anything about that.
No, it was 400 Blows. The Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows about the Antoine Doinel character. It's like a kid. It's like Francois Truffaut talking about him being a kid. I mean, it's the Fablemans of
Truffaut.
Francois Truffaut, yeah.
Okay.
So and both him and Jean-Luc Godard wrote for Cahiers du Cinéma, which is like the Rolling Stone of French cinema magazines. It's the Empire magazine, or I mean, it's like a classy. It was a classy French film critical magazine. And both of those guys came up underneath the guys who started that magazine, and they got to the point where they were being very critical of established filmmakers and saying like, this isn't the thing. And instead of them being guys that say like, everything sucks, they went out there and made their own movies. So I have nothing but respect for these guys, considering that, and they're not the first, and they were not the last. Critics who became filmmakers. Peter Bogdanovich was a critic for a long while before he became a filmmaker. So I mean, it's not something that is, that's never been done before. But yeah, there's a lot. You gotta have the right amount of, I don't know, chutzpah or whatever to actually, lay your cards on the table. Roger Ebert did. He wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And so I've never seen it, but I've heard it's crazy. So, he went out there and did that, and then decided that's not what he wanted to do. So
come to Virginia, eat an edible, and then watch that movie. And then you'll have your full experience. You'll have everything that you could possibly speak about. That movie's crazy.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's a camp thing for people, and it's just, it's like Rocky Horror to some people.
Okay.
Some people.
So then
it's not my thing. I love Rocky Horror, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a big camp guy. So Truffaut was a critic before he was a filmmaker?
At Cahiers du Cinéma, at the same magazine. They're buddies.
I knew that.
And he co-wrote, well, he didn't co-write this movie. Him and another buddy of theirs came up with a treatment of this story, which was based on a true story in France of a guy who stole a car, shot a cop, and then got in with a woman, and she had something to do with journalism. And so they kind of wrote a treatment, and people didn't like it or whatever, and so they went off and did something else. But then when Godard was looking for, what to do for his first film, and he was able to kind of like, I guess, get funding for it. So that's how it all kind of like got there. So since nobody's credited in the film, you have to go back and like, dig up all this stuff or whatever. I mean, IMDb tells you that.
Yeah,
you know,
Wikipedia too.
Yeah, exactly. That these people wrote it, or
love
these people,
it.
you know, cinematographer or directed or whatever. So yeah, it's the path to get there is interesting, and the fact that he was able to parlay this into multiple. I think his next movie was a musical, so it's kind of like, golly, you know, it's like you go from this to a musical, and then he started working with his first wife, Anna Karina, and she's in Alphaville. She's in a lot of the, you know, the kind of like girl with the bob haircut, close up, you know, French music
Twiggy.
in the background.
Yeah.
But well, Twiggy was British, I think.
Yeah, but still.
But it's that same kind of a look.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, that's Anna Karina. Like, she's the one in a lot of those movies where you see the stills and you're like, oh, well, that's the French, you know, French new wave actress.
Speaking of Rosemary's Baby, I'm going to do a deep dive on this film and find out, is that where Roman Polanski got inspiration for the haircut? Because that haircut in this, in Breathless, is exactly and even the way she cuts it in the one scene, I was like, it's a great
haircut for Jean Seberg. I mean, she's
a beautiful woman.
She's stunning.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Stunning on film. On film. Yeah.
Definitely. But anyway, so yeah, I kind of wish I would have seen this movie first and then seen some of the other. I still need to see Pierre Le Fou, which they just redid it, did a 4K version of that. That also has Jean-Paul Belmondo in it, but then it has Anna Karina in it. So yeah, it's and that's another kind of like a couple goes off on a road trip type thing, I think. So interested.
You know, another thing that I find interesting is that movies come to me when they're supposed to be in my space. Because if I had seen this 30 years ago, I'd have been like, what is this? Like, what is this black and white MTV movie that makes no sense? And why is she... I wouldn't have comprehended it. I wouldn't have understood it. I wouldn't have given it the time to understand what the film was supposed to. And, you know, I was going to say this at the beginning of the podcast, but I kind of forgot. We have talked about this before. You know, when you go to a museum and you're looking at art, and sometimes you have a visceral reaction to things in a museum, and you actually feel something, and you actually contemplate something, and you actually just know instinctually how that piece is affecting you. And then there's other stuff that you go, I don't quite understand why this is in a museum. You go look at the little placard, you understand a little bit more. And then if it's an exhibition, especially one artist, and I'm not fully understanding, I get the headsets and I learn why this piece is considered worthy to be in a museum or considered art to begin with. And sometimes just knowing one or two little details like the jump cuts or the overdubbed dialogue or the pixie haircut, it helps me understand what I'm watching or looking at in particular in a museum. It's not, I don't need to be spoon-fed. I don't need to be told why I'm feeling something. I need to be told, hey, if I'm feeling this, is this because of this, or this? Or why am I not feeling anything looking at whatever I'm looking at? And sometimes those little headset tours really can give you an understanding. You can find out that the artist was living in poverty at the time, or the artist was living in abundance at the time, and this is the influence it had on him, or, you know, whatever it very well may be. You know, there are artists out there, Andy Warhol, they don't need an explanation for me. I just feel something when I look at pop art. I just understand it in a different way than I would for whatever reason. You know, like a lot of the French Impressionists, there is a particular style of how they held their paintbrush and how they use dots to pointillism and so forth and so on, to understand that that's not one color green. That's a bunch of different blues, yellows, and greens put together to make that look like that green. And then you come up on it and you see that, but I would not have known that unless I was told that. But when I pull back from the picture and realize that green is a combination of all those colors, I go, well, maybe that's why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Does that make sense? So sometimes I like to know. I'm glad I didn't know anything about this film going into it, but now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. I can feel myself wanting to know more about this film director and this filmmaker and this idea of French New Wave. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't gotten into as many Truffaut films, and I do need to. I think I watched 400 Blows like a long time ago. It was one of those things. It was, 20 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to watch this, and then it didn't hold my attention. But I was also 20-something years old, and I had other things to do, or fell asleep, or whatever. And I think now I'm probably in a better space to be able to hone my attention in on something like that. So,
and let's watch Top Gun again.
Yeah, I will always do that.
Yeah,
so, no.
But that's what happens when you're not really understanding an art form. You go to the art form in a form that you understand.
Mm-hmm.
At least
Definitely.
I do. Yeah.
Me too. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and we're on YouTube. Just search for The Actor and the Engineer podcast. I'll see you next time.